Welcome to the show, everyone. Welcome to the show. Another episode of Boss Radio Live with NJ. I'm your host, NJ, and I have an amazing guest. It's going to be a really interesting conversation today, you guys. I have Phyllis Leavitt with us today, but you'll learn a little bit more about her in a moment. But share the show, share the episode. Going to be a very interesting conversation. It's Boss Radio Live with NJ, your three-dimensional podcast. Baltimore, Maryland. I love my city. Wow. You have to have balance.
Mother's Day extravaganza event being held. ILC Lois Butler Culver.
Come meet me today at the Spirit Fest. I want to hear what you have to say. Again, welcome to the show, everyone. It's going to be a great show today. I really cannot wait to get started. Today's guest is Phyllis Leavitt. She is a psychotherapist, an author, and a speaker. And we're going to learn a little more about what that means. But in case you guys have never heard of Phyllis, I'm just going to give you just a tad bit of information about her before we get started with today's show. Phyllis E. Leavitt, psychotherapist, author, and speaker. For 34 years, Phyllis has worked extensively to treat abuse and dysfunctional family dynamics and their aftermath. Today, Phyllis is here to share some important elements for healing. The author of A Light in the Darkness and Into the Fire and her new book, Phyllis believes that the principles of psychotherapy can be used to heal our country of its escalating hatred, divisiveness, and violence, and help create a more loving and sustainable world. Please welcome to the show, everyone, Miss Phyllis Leavitt.
Well, hi, and thank you so much for having me here with you today.
I'm so glad that you were able to be on the show today, and I don't want to waste any time. I want to hop right into it. First, I always love to, just talk to the guests about how they even got to where they are. So I'd love to talk a bit about that. Like, how did you get to this place where you've written all of these books now, and you're talking to people about their healing and their family dysfunction and how to, heal from that?
Yeah, well, I always wanted to be a writer when I was really young, and that was just something I really gravitated to. And when I was young, I didn't know what I was going to write about. I just wanted to write. And then, my life circumstances kind of brought me to a very difficult time when I was in my mid-30s. I had 3 little children, and I was kind of at a very dark, kind of low, lost period in my life. And I ended up going to seek out help for myself, and I went to a psychotherapist. And it really changed my life to begin to understand how my early conditioning and the things that had happened to me early in life were really affecting the way I felt about myself some of the choices I had made in life, some of the difficulties I had in relationship, the places where I felt blocked in my creativity, and really understanding the effects of early childhood trauma on my present day life at that time. And the upshot was that I decided to become a therapist myself, and I went back to graduate school and got a degree in psychology and counseling, and continued my own healing journey. And I had a couple of really big ahas along the way that I'll try to share with you very briefly. And the first one was that going through my own process of healing really gave me so much understanding on a very deep level and a lot of compassion for what people suffer when they're not treated well by other people. And especially if they don't get rescued from that and they don't get a chance to heal or have even, a way to heal or know that it's possible. And it made me so sensitive to how many people in the world today don't have the opportunity to even be safe or heal. And they become symptomatic the way I did. My symptoms were primarily depression and anxiety. But for many people, there's a whole range of symptoms that people have when they're hurt and they don't have a chance to heal, including those, but also becoming very reclusive or becoming very aggressive or addicted or people pleasing or driven. There's all kinds of ways, or obsessive. There's all kinds of ways that people become symptomatic when they don't get help. And those symptoms are a sign that they're in emotional distress. And I know that we tend to live in a society that often blames people for their symptoms rather than really delving into the causes of them and looking for what would be healing and curative. The second big aha, so I realized that there's millions of people all over the world suffering the after effects of having been hurt by other people, and they become symptomatic and they're a mystery to themselves the way I was to myself. And the second big aha was that having studied family dynamics so deeply as a therapist and working with them with hundreds of clients over the years, I began to see that family systems dynamics exist in all groups. There's people in charge, there's people who sort of obey or have different roles in the family. And to the extent that our larger systems, including government, but it could be larger institutions or schools or businesses or places of worship, to the extent that they're running on healthy family dynamics, which are, respect and love and a sense of belonging and safety and being provided for and counting on others to be cooperative with you. And especially when people are committed to nonviolent communication and conflict resolution, you have the basic elements of a healthy family, and where no one is all important and the good of the whole is in some balance with the good of the individual, given that we're all imperfect and no family is perfect, but that we do our best. And that a dysfunctional family has abuse, neglect, a lot of heavy judgment or unrealistic expectations, violence, sometimes physical violence, emotional violence, name calling, sexual abuse, addiction. And when we take the lens of a dysfunctional or abusive family and we hold it up to what's going on in our country today and in some of our larger institutions, I could see that there's a lot of dysfunctional dynamics happening on very large levels in our country. And I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to share with people what I understood about how we're not operating on healthy dynamics in so many ways in our country. We target certain vulnerable populations, we withhold resources. There's a lot of violence coming down from the top. We condone violence in other parts of the world. And I wanted to point that out because I would like to bring that healing to the family of America, because I think a lot of people are suffering here as well as around the world. And the principles of the best healing principles that we know from family therapy and psychotherapy could be applied to our nation. And I actually think a lot of people really want that.
Wow. You said a lot. You said a lot.
That's what I do.
You said a lot in that few minutes, Phyllis. So I want to try to break some of that down. So
Sure.
first of all, I want to say I think it's amazing that that you actually went through that in the treatment yourself, and then decided to go on to become a psychotherapist yourself, and then take your experiences and kind of pay that forward what you learned. So I think that's amazing. Also, it puts you in a very unique position in that you have that personal understanding of what people are going through. So I think that is very um, beneficial, when people are dealing with all of those things that you named, all of that trauma that and dysfunction that you named, and they have someone who understands it from not only a professional level but from a personal level as well. And so I think we need much more of that in this world, and I know there are other people like that as well, but I think we need much more of that as far as that level of empathy and understanding
Hmm.
from our treatment professionals. But outside of that, when you started talking about that dynamic, as you were talking, my mind was just going because I was thinking like, oh my gosh, that really is honestly the truth, because you have like a family dynamic even in your relationship with like your friends,
Hmm.
and even in your relationship at work. You form those bonds, you have that boss relationship, which is that authoritative kind of person over
Right.
you, and your work becomes a family. People even call that my work family, they start saying. And so you really do have that, but you're talking about even a larger scale, which I had never thought of. But even with that, so that's a really amazing to think of all of that, all of us operating in that kind of dysfunctional family dynamic,
Hmm.
and that's
Hmm.
very, very, very
Hmm.
interesting to think of it in that manner. And so, how do you think we got here? I mean, I think there are a million answers for that. So,
There are a million answers for that, and one of the things I would like to say to start out with is one of the reasons why, and there's many reasons why I wrote my book, but one of them is that I really, from that view that I just shared with you, what I see is that our collective mental health is really what's missing from national political conversation. And because it's missing, we are subject to such dysfunctional family dynamics in America. So when I say that, what I mean is that when people are treated well, let me back up even further and just say, in all the years that I've been a psychotherapist and all the work that I did personally, what I have learned, one very rock bottom thing, and that is that all of the suffering that people have starts with some injury to love and belonging and safety. When people are not loved, when they don't feel they're wanted or included or valued, when they're not safe, when there's no commitment to peaceful conflict resolution around them, they become symptomatic. All the different symptoms we just described. And um, and we have people in positions of power who are also symptomatic. And we have populations that are symptomatic. And two of the big outcomes, I named a lot of symptoms that occur when people are hurt, but I want to identify two big trends which I see escalating not only in our country but around the world. And that is that when people are hurt, when they're mistreated, when they're not valued and cared for, when they're not safe, um, they tend to fall into two different categories that I've seen over the years with the people that I've worked with. And that is they either become easily overempowered because they were overpowered in the dysfunctional and abusive systems they grew up in. They had no voice. They couldn't fight back. They couldn't get help. And so they've internalized a sense of helplessness in the face of harm from other people. And the other main trend are those people who have identified with the aggressor and become aggressive and sometimes violent themselves. So you have these two streams of outcomes, people who are easily dominated and people who are invested in dominating. And we see this playing out on a national level. There's whole populations that have really been deprived of any voice and any power. And we have other people in positions of power or groups. Sometimes it's economic differences, sometimes it's gender differences, sometimes it's racial and religious differences. We have people in power who have whole populations then that they can dominate because of the positions that they've ended up in. And both sides are the result of mistreatment. I think we don't understand as a general population that even the victimizers are also victims at heart that have not been treated. They've identified with the aggressor as a survival mechanism. Does that mean we just forgive what they do? No. We still have to address it, but we need to understand it, because if we don't look for root causes, we can't break this cycle. And that's one of the big missing pieces in our country when I say that our mental health is really a missing piece in national conversation, even though we are talking about mental health more and more. But we tend to talk about mental health when it's in regard to certain most symptomatic populations, the people who are, committing crimes or the people who are abusing their children. But really it's our collective mental health that we need to talk about and address. And one of the things, I'll say this real quickly and then please jump back in, having been a therapist for so many years, one of the things that I've seen is that the level of disconnection and dysfunction and abuse and neglect in the average family is epidemic in America today. People are really suffering in their families, and intergenerationally, very dysfunctional and abusive dynamics are passed down and passed down and passed down. And we have to stop blaming our victims and look for the causes.
I was having a conversation with someone, and we were talking about how parenting has changed, and then we were talking about in a different, kind of like how children have changed, and even while we were having that conversation, I don't think we ever connected the two, like that maybe the children have changed because the parenting has changed. But we were talking about the fact that parents, everybody's so busy. Everybody's doing, people are starting businesses, they're working these high powered jobs, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're running all over the place. So you have people who are just chronically busy and like are never home. So you have like families like that, and those families actually never think that those parents don't think that they're doing anything wrong because they're supporting their families. So they're like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm supporting my family. But then you have kids who are like what they call a latchkey children, latchkey kids. Like literally their parents are never there or hardly ever there. And they are actually start experiencing some issues, I believe. But then you have ones who are actually suffering from neglect, because you have things like the parents who were on drugs and just weren't there, or who were abusive. And then they, like you were talking about, like their kids may turn out to be abusive or on drugs themselves, like all sorts of things. So it's like all of these, in my family, we call them generational curses, but really it's behaviors that have just repeated over this dysfunction that's just passing down from generation to generation. So I mean, just what do you think of, I guess that's what you're kind of saying, or what do you think
Yeah.
about that?
No, I agree with you. I think it has changed. Our world has changed for children. Our world has changed for parents dramatically here. And I can't speak for the entire world, but I think it's probably true in many countries. Um, Even since I was a child, I don't think I had one friend growing up whose mother worked. We people did not have to have two incomes to survive when I grew up. And I think that has really, really changed and made
Mhm.
parents less available. And I think the social and certainly the social media influences that children have today were non-existent when I grew up. And sometimes they're good influences and sometimes they're really not. And but what I really want to say is not only have children and the culture for children changed and the culture for parents changed, and the stressors, I think, have grown enormously for
Mhm.
people in terms of access to medical care, access to good education, access to good housing, um, being able to earn a living wage, all of these things that families are really up against in many, many parts of our society and our communities. But what's also changed is the culture around us, and it's not people centered. And I don't know if it was when I grew up, but it's really not people centered now. And one of the big things that I'm an advocate for is that I really believe if we're going to address mental health in our country, we have to address the family system of America, because we're not making people and families a priority. And when we don't make people and families a priority, and children especially, then they suffer. And we have symptomatic children, as you said. They don't have anybody around, or their parents are so stressed out, they're not able to parent well, or they never had good role models for parenting themselves. So if we're going to address mental health in our country, we have to stop targeting certain people and look at ourselves as a family. Are we actually providing for every family member? I believe that psychotherapy and many healing modalities should be funded by the federal government. I think we need to take our resources out of weapons, and especially out of weapons of mass destruction, where billions of dollars are spent in better ways to kill people. It makes no logical sense. It's not psychologically, it doesn't make any sense psychologically. If you had a family that was spending all their money on weapons and not feeding some of their children, you'd say they were mentally disturbed. And yet we do that as a country. I think our families and our children need to be our number one priority.
Mm. Well, I would agree. No, seriously, I would agree. And I do feel like we don't put enough emphasis on the family unit. And we know everything doesn't work out perfectly, and family
Right.
units do not have to be, that the mom, the dad, and 2.5 children. So we know that every family unit could look different. You could have a single mom or single dad, or
Right.
whatever. But I think more so what you're talking about, and what I would think is that you're talking about like just having that stable unit there that identifies as a family, and that is making sure that they are taking care of the kids, and
Hmm.
creating a safe environment for
Well,
them
whatever the
to
family
grow.
system is, whether it's a
Mhm.
single mom or a single dad or grandparents or an aunt and uncle raising the kids,
Right.
whatever it
Whatever.
is,
Yeah.
are we supplying the resources that people need to thrive, not just to survive one day at a time, but do we fund really good child care? Do we pay teachers well enough to have really good teachers in our school systems and school counselors? And if there's parents who are mistreating their children or not providing for their children, can we stop, looking at them as criminals and actually try to help them? How do we break the cycle of abuse? We have to address the injuries that people have sustained themselves that have caused them to repeat what they knew that was hurtful or dysfunctional. So I feel like a lot of resources should be devoted toward helping people recover and heal the wounds that they have survived so that they don't pass them on. And yes, of course, there's people we don't know how to treat, or people who have committed terrible crimes, and they may not be able to be back in society and safe for us. But there are many people that are treatable. They just need to feel like somebody cares about what happened to them and wants to help them. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I love this idea that you have that, people should be, and this is, if you can speak on this, because I see this as a big issue that we're experiencing right now. So you were talking about the fact that we are speaking more about mental health, which is great. And you talked about the fact that you do believe that the government should actually be paying for like mental health, psychotherapy, things like that. What I see is a lack of, I don't know whether it is a lack of professionals or a lack of the like available services. I just don't know what it is, because there are like people on waiting lists to get help. And so I think this has just been very interesting, because I guess as more people are becoming aware of the fact to really to take care of their mental health, more people have been seeking help. And it seems to have overwhelmed the system kind of. So can you talk about that a bit, because that's where I see us right now.
Well, I think there's two pieces to what you're saying, and I love what you brought up, because yes, there's a lot of people who are actively seeking help who can't get it. Either they're on a long waiting list, or the resources are not available in their community, or there's too much stigma for them to even seek that still. And there still is stigma around mental health. But I think the two pieces are, and they go back to when I say the government should pay for mental health, what I really mean is those are our tax dollars. Our tax dollars should be spent on what people really need in their lives. And what people need is mental health services and counseling and better child care for their children, and health care and housing and all the things that we've mentioned. So what I'm talking about is not government like it's some, alien object, but the government is supposed to represent the people, and the tax dollars come from the people. And so that's really what I just want to emphasize, that because, the government isn't just some, it should be a part of us. It should be attending to what the people who voted, officials into office actually care about and need in their lives. So now you have to repeat your question. Sorry about that.
Well, before I even repeat the question, I'm going to say I'm actually a proponent that we should have free health care. So that would just be another component of it. If we had it, it would just be another part that would be free.
Well, I agree with you. But free means somebody pays for it. So that means our tax dollars pay for it. So I agree with that. I think it should be available to every single person who wants it, which also means that we start putting some of those resources, again, diverting them from some of the places where they're spent on, on weapons of mass destruction and other things that actually, I say that they're obsolete. If we used our weapons of mass destruction, most of us wouldn't be here anymore. What sense does that make? Billions and billions of dollars and man hours going into the creation of things that could destroy life on this planet. That is a mental health issue. That is a mental health issue that we still advocate that kind of allocation of our resources. So yes, I agree with you. I think mental health care should be free. And when we talk about that, then that means that some of those tax dollars go to fund people to get a higher education. You know, how many people can't afford a higher education or to get a degree in psychology or counseling or child, services, or, a lot of people can't afford that. The price of higher education is skyrocketing. And so we have to allocate that. If we want to have more counselors and we want to have more people trained to do that, then as a society, as a family of America, we have to understand the urgent need to fund these kinds of resources for people. Because, human beings are amazing. Human beings are incredible. We're so intelligent. We're so creative. We're so artistic and scientific and mathematically inclined. I mean, our intelligence has grown and grown over the course of human history, and our abilities to create the kind of things that we want to make our lives easier. Look at what we've created even in the last 100 years. I mean, it's phenomenal. And so if we want something bad enough, we make it happen. And I think we have to know that we really need to fund our mental health as a priority, as at the top of the list, because, and I say this over and over again, guns and weapons do not make people safe. Safe people make people safe. And safe people are healed people. Safe people are people who are loving and kind and committed not to use violence when there's conflict.
Well, thank you. I thank you for all that you have definitely laid out for us today. And your book is available on your website, and I'm just going to put your website up right there. Leave that up for folks to get, and it's also you guys going to be in the chat as well. In the chat for you to grab that link and check out Phyllis's website and get her book. And this has been a really great show, because I think what you're saying is definitely true, and we see the symptoms of it every day when we walk outside, and it's not getting any better, on its own. It's just getting worse, and so we definitely need to do something. And I think what you have put out there and it's in your book is a great solution.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, and my book is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all the major booksellers. And please visit me at my website. Feel free to contact me. I have interviews on YouTube, and I'm all the social media, and I've written lots of articles, and I'm happy to connect with anyone who wants to connect with me. So feel free to reach out and let me know if you have something that you need or want or just want to talk about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Phyllis. This has been a great show. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been just a wonderful conversation, and I really appreciate you and all the good work that you're doing here.
Thank you so much. All right, you guys, another great show. I thank my guest, Miss Phyllis Leavitt, for joining us today. So, you guys, we are here every second and fourth Friday. So be sure to tune in. Now, my birthday is coming up, so I'm off this fourth Friday, but we'll be back in June with more great guests, more shows. But this has been a great show. Definitely, again, check out Phyllis's website. Get her book. She says it's available on Barnes and Nobles, all the places, Amazon. Check that out. America in Therapy. And so I'll see you guys the next time. Until then, you all stay boss.